It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The Paris Olympic opening ceremony promises the greatest show in sporting history, despite attempts to derail it. Competitors brave relentless rain as part of a stunning floating parade. And though it's been a day of chaos and uncertainty, tonight the city is shining bright. But coordinated arson attacks caused chaos on the French rail network, disrupting the journeys of athletes and spectators.
We'll see. We have opening ceremonies tickets tonight, so I don't know. We came all the way from Florida, so we better not miss it.
Also tonight, a police officer is now under criminal investigation after a video of a man being kicked and stamped on as he lay on the floor at Manchester Airport. The NHS watchdog that regulates hospitals, GPs and care homes is itself found to be not fit for purpose.
Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
And finally, backed by the Obamas, Kamala Harris is endorsed by the former president and his wife. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. The opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Paris has seen the River Seine transformed this evening into an open-air theatre with athletes and performers parading on a flotilla of barges towards the Eiffel Tower. But not everyone who planned to be there will have made it after the French rail network was thrown into chaos by a series of coordinated arson attacks. It's still not clear who was behind them, but it was a well-planned operation designed to cause maximum disruption. We'll have more on that in just a moment with Adam Parsons. But first, here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
The Olympics has never seen a spectacle like this before. A floating opening ceremony. The usual stadium show switched to the Seine. Athletes parading on 85 boats. French history and culture showcased on the riverbanks with an international flavour. Lady Gaga leading the cabaret in French, before one of the most iconic sights and sounds of this city. It wouldn't be a Parisian party without Moulin Rouge dancers. But more recent contributions to the world were also performed. Parkour from a mystery torchbearer, dashing across rooftops, reaching Notre Dame, where scaffolding became a stage, celebrating craftsmanship and the cathedral's restoration 5 years after a devastating fire. And the journey through French history saluted the spirit of revolution. Choristers appearing as Marie Antoinette. This open-air stage showing off iconic landmarks. Why Paris was so determined to defy terror concerns to produce this elaborate show. They just couldn't control the weather. Team GB flag bearers Tom Daley and Helen Glover among those getting drenched. And it was all too soggy for these spectators, leaving early.
We stayed like for 2 hours. Bulgaria's boat passed, we took a video, and then we left because of the rain.
Yeah, the weather, it was hard to see anything.
Yeah, we couldn't see anything, so that's why we left.
A little bit of rain, but it's okay.
Too many rain.
But the show went on. The home of haute couture celebrated on a bridge transformed into a catwalk. It was sprawling and spectacular, with a security operation on a scale France has never seen before in peacetime. Now for the sport to truly get underway.
Rob Harris, Sky News, Paris.
Well, as Paris prepared for that opening ceremony, a coordinated plan of sabotage on France's rail network brought chaos affecting around 800,000 passengers. The impact meant 1 in 4 Eurostar trains from London to Paris was cancelled. Even the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, had to take a plane instead. The massive attack was planned, but it's still not clear who was responsible. Our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, has this report.
Inspecting the damage of a sinister assault on the railways that keep France moving. Just hours before the Olympic opening ceremony, arsonists attacked the lines that bind together this nation. Now, painstakingly, every part, every cable has to be checked to make sure it's safe. The high-speed train links crisscross France And these attacks were coordinated. To the north, arsonists severed the link from Lille to Paris. To the east, an attack cut off Strasbourg and much of Europe. To the west, a hit near the intersection between Rennes and Bordeaux. And a fourth attempted arson attack was foiled at Virginie, leaving the high-speed link to the south intact. The legacy of these attacks? A national sense of shock.
I have a little bit of anger, a bit preoccupied, a bit stressed. Anger, but we're not going to let ourselves destabilize by this.
And it is that threat of destabilization that worries people. Already this week, a Russian has been arrested in Paris on suspicion of planning to disrupt these games. The culprits here are still unknown. The Prime Minister says he's using police and intelligence services to pursue those responsible.
What we know, what we can see is that this operation has been planned, coordinated, that key points have been targeted, which show a kind of knowledge of the network. They knew where to hit.
The result, massive disruption on a very busy day. Many Parisians had been leaving their city to avoid the upheaval caused by the games. Crowds of spectators were travelling the other way. There were even athletes on their way to the opening ceremony. In all, around 800,000 travellers were affected.
But basically, we needed to go to Gaga for the wedding of my cousin, and we still don't know how we're going to get there, but hopefully we'll manage. I don't know.
This isn't just about massive disruption, it's about deep symbolism. Nations host the Olympics because they want others to see them as confident and competent. And at the moment, the world is seeing France in a state of chaos. And the ripples spread over the channel. Eurostar advising people not to travel from Britain.
About an hour so far, so we'll see. We have opening ceremonies tickets tonight, so I don't know. We came all the way from Florida, so we better not miss it.
It feels like there is now a police officer on every corner in Paris. The nation's hope is that the focus is about to move from security to sport. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Paris.
Well, let's speak then to our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who's by the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And Rob, there was always going to be heightened security concerns ahead of tonight's unusual and ambitious and wet opening ceremony, still underway behind you. But what changes do you think spectators will see in the coming days?
Well, security is already very high. This is the largest peacetime operation ever seen in Paris. And obviously, this instance of sabotage on the railways happened far beyond Paris in more remote areas. And that has always been the concern, the fact that there's a sprawling security operation required across the country. Now there will be increased vigilance and surveillance across the railways as they try to repair the damage caused by those coordinated attacks affecting lines all into Paris. But the show has gone on, but it has been dampened the spirit somewhat by this intense downpour that's going on around me. We saw so many people leaving before the end of this ceremony because they've never tried to stage a ceremony like this at an Olympics, not in the stadium as usual, but right the way through the heart of this city. So not the most ideal conditions to watch a show that tried to showcase a lot of French history and culture, some of the old, some of the modern, some of those more traditional elements too, before the moment a short time ago when French President Emmanuel Macron declared these games officially open. A century on, the Olympics are back in Paris, but with huge challenges to try to keep them safe over the next 2 weeks or so, with those terror threats and France already on its highest state of terror alert. But the ceremony is concluding very shortly. We're expecting to see who will actually light the cauldron. They've kept it a surprise all along the way. We've seen some tennis stars like Rafa Nadal involved just at this final stage. Zinedine Zidane, the former French footballing great, also involved. But soon that flame will be on the cauldron and take centre stage before the athletes themselves start their pursuit of gold medals.
Yes, better be a good surprise. Rob, thank you very much indeed, live there in Paris. Now, a criminal investigation has been launched into a police officer after a video emerged of a man being kicked and stamped on as he lay on the floor at Manchester Airport. 3 police officers had been injured in a series of clashes leading up to the incident. Tonight, the head of the Greater Manchester Police has said it's a source of profound regret that the incident caused such shock and upset, resulting in 2 nights of protests in Rochdale and Manchester. A warning, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter's report contains pictures you may find distressing.
The impact of this moment between armed police and suspects at Manchester Airport runs deep. One officer has now been placed under criminal investigation for assault as the independent inquiry moves at pace. The police officer is under investigation for both assault and gross misconduct. He'll be questioned about a number of alleged breaches of police professional standards, including his use of force. The 2 brothers in the video, Fahir and Ahmad, are represented by a solicitor who is pushing for further accountability. When you say the family want justice, what do you interpret that as looking like?
Suspensions of all the officers involved, criminal inquiries to be launched, them to be charged with a criminal offence, and then they could go to court and have a trial.
With feelings raw about what everyone has seen this week, a moment of reflection during Friday prayers.
It's a level of police violence that we're not used to in this country, and I think that's what's really been shocking about it. Obviously, we still need to wait for the full facts to emerge, but from what we can see from the videos, kicking a man in the head when he's already on the ground, he's already looking like he's fairly restrained, is difficult to justify, and I think that is what has caused so much shock and anger.
Does it kind of damage your trust with the police?
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
A lot, yeah. Because police are supposed to be there to protect you, but they're not there, so...
I think they will sort it out. The people should be calm regarding this particular issue. And every person should cooperate with the institution.
The Mayor of Greater Manchester acknowledges the community concerns and continues to call for calm while the investigation is underway.
I do think it's in the interests of our communities and the safety of people in our communities that we don't allow this thing just to be continually stoked up. There is a process now. People were protesting, calling for there to be a proper, thorough, detailed process. Well, there is one now.
People have remained peaceful, but they do want both answers and accountability. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Rochdale.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says he is stunned by significant failings at the Care Quality Commission, the body meant to check on health and social care in England. From hospitals to GPs, dentists and care homes, an independent review found inspectors lacking experience and 1 in 5 NHS services yet to be given a rating because of the backlog. Sky's Laura Bondock has more.
Have you seen this, look?
This Nottinghamshire nursing home is rated outstanding. They pay £8,000 a year for CQC regulation and are furious the watchdog is failing.
I feel quite angry about that, not for myself personally, but for the people who use our service and their families. They deserve to know that the judgments made by the regulator are accurate, objective and fair. And that isn't a system that we have at the moment.
The CQC regulates all health and social care settings, but an interim independent report uncovered multiple failings. It found 1 in 5 providers have never been inspected. Some re-inspections taking several years, with one hospital last rated over 10 years ago. And it also found inexperience among some inspectors. One had never been inside a hospital before. The new Health Secretary says the CQC is not fit for purpose.
Any one of those things would be shocking. Taken together, they represent a stunning failure in the regulator that is meant to be able to give us a true and accurate reflection on quality of care and patient safety, on care users' safety. That's how serious this is.
It's really nice to meet you.
Wes Streeting says urgent measures are being put in place, but for some the findings are no surprise. Connor Sparrowhawk was 18 when he died in an NHS assessment unit in 2013. He had autism and epilepsy and drowned in a bath.
It's so angering and it's so depressing.
Connor's mother, Sarah, fears more lives are at risk.
I can't even imagine what harm is going on right now, that these failings are enabling people to be in situations like Connor was in, through a lack of any regulatory focus that is effective.
The CQC accepts the report's recommendations and says it's working at pace to restore trust. But with such systemic and severe dysfunction, fixing the watchdog won't be easy. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has said a multi-billion-pound black hole in the public finances has been revealed, and she will need to be honest about the scale of the financial challenges ahead. Public sector pay decisions are looming over millions of workers, with the Chancellor expected to reveal the state of the public finances and potentially prepare the ground for tax rises in the autumn. Here's our business correspondent, Paul Kelso.
Rachel Reeves may present the hole in the public finances as a surprise, but the truth is we and she knew about most of the problems already. At the last budget, Jeremy Hunt pencilled in departmental spending increases of just 1% for the next 5 years. But it's not spread evenly. Some departments, health, schools and defence, are protected, which means they get more money, between 2 and nearly 3% more. And once you've spent that, the unprotected departments, from justice to transport, are left facing deep cuts, up to 3.5%, or 10 to 20 billion pounds in cash. Now, there's another reason this 1% is not realistic. It's the almost 6 million public sector workers who want and need a pay rise. This shows public sector pay adjusted for inflation. And in real terms, these workers are earning less than they were back in 2010. If you follow the dotted line, you could see it. And it's not just the level of pay, it's the gap to the private sector in blue here. Now, Rachel Reeves, we understand, is going to address this by approving a 5.5% pay increase that would cost £10 billion more than has been budgeted for if everybody got it. Now, as well as spending and pay, there's another black hole. The Chancellor has asked every department to spell out looming crises, so we can expect to hear about one-off costs like compensation to the victims of the infected blood and post office scandals, as Rachel Reeves gets all the bad news out and blames the last government.
I will make my statement to Parliament on Monday, but I have been honest during the election campaign and in the last 3 weeks about the scale of the inheritance that this government would have to pick up. The Conservatives have created this mess, but let me be very clear, I will fix it.
The obvious question now is, what is she going to do about it, starting with tax? This is where the government gets its revenue, almost £1 trillion a year, but Reeves has ruled out increasing the biggest contributors: income taxes, VAT, corporation tax. She won't raise any of those. That leaves a narrow band of options, including capital gains tax, inheritance tax, possibly some pensions relief. And she's got limited room for more borrowing too, having vowed to stick to a self-imposed fiscal rule that the national debt, that's the blue line, falls in the 5th year of the forecast. In March, the government met the rule by an historically tiny amount of headroom, just £8.9 billion, and we know that's not even close to filling the black hole. Now, we should remember these are all political choices as well as economic calculations that the Conservatives would have faced too. But unless the economy grows unexpectedly fast, the Chancellor's options are as narrow as the finances are tight.
Let's speak now to our political correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan. So that update from the government on the state of the country's finances coming on Monday, Gurpreet, preparing the public for bad news, it seems, but to what end?
Well, it certainly looks like the government is laying the groundwork for tax rises in the autumn. I think the first thing worth pointing out is that on Monday, we're not going to get a fiscal event in the traditional sense. There's going to be no report from the Office for Budget Responsibility. There won't be a detailed spending review. Instead, this is an audit that the government has independently ordered into government spending under its predecessor. And Rachel Reeves, the new Chancellor, is expected to say on Monday that that audit has uncovered a black hole somewhere in the region of £20 billion that needs filling. Now, how much of that is genuinely new information to Labour? The Tories will no doubt accuse the party of spin, with Rishi Sunak having already said that this is political cover to push through tax increases. But Labour were repeatedly asked on the campaign trail about some of the issues facing the public finances, because economists had been warning for several months that whoever wins the next election would have to address serious fault lines within the public finances, that there were gaps in the public finances to the tune of 16 to 20 billion pounds. Labour didn't want to get embroiled in any discussions about that because they didn't want to get caught up in a trap of committing to higher taxes or cutting public spending. But now that they are in government, they are having to face the reality. And as well as this, they're dealing with issues around public sector pay. And that's why we're getting this sort of narrative, this performance of shocking new discoveries.
Preet in Downing Street, thank you. An alternative healer has been found guilty of manslaughter over the death of a 71-year-old woman at a slapping therapy workshop. Danielle Carr-Gom, who was diabetic, died after she stopped taking her insulin at the week-long retreat in Wiltshire. Hongshe Xiao had no medical qualifications or training. A warning: Dan Whitehead's report contains scenes from slapping workshops.
Just try 5 minutes. See what's going to happen, OK? Very simple. If you feel the pain, good news. That means you got a problem.
They came for help, but were in the hands of a dangerous man. Hongshe Xiao, who had no medical qualifications or training, had practiced Pai-Dalajin therapy for years. Participants slapped themselves to expel poisonous waste from the body. But just days into one of his UK workshops, Danielle Carr-Gom from East Sussex died.
I find that I've been able to reduce my insulin by half.
The 71-year-old diabetic had vouched for Xiao after attending one of his events in Bulgaria.
You're definitely a messenger sent by God.
But it was during a course in 2016 in Wiltshire that she stopped her normal medication. Prosecutors say the 30 people who attended the workshop here were keen disciples of Xiao. In the lead up to the event, they'd fasted for several days, and Danielle Carr-Gom had stopped using her insulin, which Xiao is said to have congratulated her on. Within days, she became seriously ill, crying on her bed and howling in pain, Winchester Crown Court heard. She died on the 4th day of the course. Nearly 8 years on, Xiao has been convicted of manslaughter by gross negligence.
I think the disregard he shows for Danielle was very much the fact that he knew the potential consequences of an insulin type 1 diabetic stopping taking their insulin. It happened in Australia in April 2015 when a 6-year-old boy died. It happened again in July 2016 when Danielle became seriously unwell until he persuaded her to take her insulin. And of course this final time when sadly she died.
The trial heard how Xiao from California was previously found guilty of the manslaughter of a 6-year-old boy in Australia, a year and a half before Mrs. Carr-Gom's death. The boy's parents stopped giving him his insulin after attending one of his workshops in Sydney. Those registered to practice safe complementary medicine say it's vital patients seek professional advice.
If somebody is doing something that hasn't been researched, it hasn't been looked at properly, it hasn't been assessed and accredited by the CMA, the Complementary Medical Association, then yes, you know, the person who's receiving the treatment doesn't know what they're getting. So, you know, you've got to be very, very careful. I always urge caution.
Xiao told the trial he was not a medical doctor, but prosecutors say he knew Mrs. Carr-Gom was risking death and had an influence over her decision. Dan Whitehead, Sky News, in Seine, Wiltshire.
3 children who died in a fire in East Ham earlier this month have been named. 13-year-old Nakash Malik, 11-year-old Ayat Malik and 7-year-old Mohammed Hanan Malik were at home when the fire started on the 13th of July. Their parents say they are loved beyond words and missed beyond measure. The cause of the fire is still being investigated. The government has confirmed it will not pursue an objection to the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for Israel's Prime Minister. A warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as his Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, was issued earlier this year over alleged war crimes. Rishi Sunak's government had told the ICC it intended to challenge the decision, but the new Labour administration has now dropped that plan. Two of the world's biggest drug lords from Mexico's Sinaloa cartel have been arrested by US federal agents. Ismael Zambada, or El Mayo, and Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the son of drug baron El Chapo, have been taken into custody. A Mexican federal official said they arrived in the US on a private plane. It's reported they were tricked into thinking the aircraft was not leaving Mexico. Now, he is one of the biggest names in the Democratic Party and the last to go all in to support Kamala Harris. But today, the former US President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle put their political weight behind her. It is a boost for the vice president, who appears to be on course to run for the White House with the November election just over 100 days away. David Blevins reports now from Washington.
Kamala.
Hello. Hi.
Hey there.
Oh, hi, you're both together.
It came as she crisscrossed the country, 4 states in 4 days, awaiting a decision from the former president and first lady.
We called to say Michelle and I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Michelle Obama quashing months of speculation that she could be a candidate herself by giving Kamala Harris her seal of approval.
I can't have this phone call without saying to my girl Kamala, I am proud of you. This is going to be historic.
Oh my goodness. Michelle, Barack, this means so much to me.
The vice president is carving her own path, a distinct change in tone on the war in Gaza, following a meeting with Israel's prime minister.
We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
The greatest dinner I've ever had.
Mar-a-Lago in Florida, more comfortable territory for Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife. Donald Trump's approach very different to that of Kamala Harris.
I think her remarks were disrespectful. They weren't very nice, pertaining to Israel. I actually don't know how a person who's Jewish can vote for her, but that's up to them.
The Harris campaign is now publicly acknowledging that the vetting of potential running mates is underway, while the Trump campaign appears to be rethinking its offer of an anytime, anyplace debate, now refusing to confirm until the Democrats have formally ratified their new nominee. There's a broad coalition forming around her, a record 164,000 taking part in a Zoom call for Kamala Harris.
And she is coming in with another $50,000 match.
White women raising $8.5 million from one call, echoing the support of black women who've been leading the charge. The endorsement of the Obamas now adding to the momentum.
Thank you both. It means so much. And we're going to have some fun with this too, aren't we?
Neck and neck with Donald Trump in the polls, Joe Biden's exit a game changer. The race for the White House is on. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons, and the journalist and president of Murray Edwards College at Cambridge University, Dorothy Byrne. Welcome to both of you. Certainly among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of the Daily Mail about the attacks on the French rail network for the Olympics and the bad weather that has hit the event tonight. Its headline, La Farce. Back with that and plenty more after this. Well, this is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. The Paris Olympic opening ceremony delivers one of the greatest shows in sporting history, despite attempts to derail it. Arson attacks cause chaos across the French rail network, causing hundreds of trains to be stopped. And let's just bring... So you are watching the press preview, taking a look at tomorrow's newspapers. Joining me this evening, we have Jake Wallace-Simons from the Jewish Chronicle and Dorothy Byrne from the Murray Edwards College at Cambridge University, journalist and president of said college. Welcome to both of you. So let's see what's on the front pages then, shall we? As the Olympics get underway in Paris, the Eye says the hunt is on for arsonists who set fires on rail lines to deliberately disrupt the Games. The Eye describes events in France and the rain, which has followed, as la farce. The Times has the simple headline, Olympics sabotaged, if we have it. Well, the Mirror does something similar, just one word, sabotaged. There's the Times. The Telegraph and the Mirror, there we go. The Telegraph says suspicion in France is falling on far-left agitators, possibly with involvement from Russia. And according to the Financial Times, the Chancellor will delay a series of hospital and road-related projects that the new government believes weren't properly costed by the Tories. The Express tells its readers that former Chancellor Jeremy Hunt thinks it's all a Labour con to justify big tax rises. The Guardian has good news for millions of public sector workers who the paper says can expect an above-inflation pay rise to be announced by the Chancellor next week. Daily Star hears that a bad waxwork of the late singer Sinead O'Connor has been removed from a museum because, as the paper puts it, nothing compares. A reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you listen to our guests. So let's head straight to Jake and Dorothy. Welcome to both of you. So, the Olympics. Should we do a bit of the pictures that we've seen, first of all? The Eye weekend with the extraordinary, the red, white and blue of the smoke on the bridges. Let the Games begin. Seine stars an extraordinary Olympics opening ceremony. All 6 kilometres of it, Dorothy.
Yes, and... it was wonderful, despite the rain, and we're British, so we're used to the rain. I think if some of these things had gone wrong, and it was in London, we wouldn't have some of these headlines and we wouldn't be being so negative. Let's be positive about it. Well done to the French. They did something very different that nobody had done before, and it was magnifique.
Very good. But on the day of, effectively, criminality or more across the rail network, to put on an event like this with 300,000 spectators across 6 kilometres of the Seine, with 2,000 artists, 500 musicians, 100 heads of state and dignitaries, it's a real headache you've given yourself away from the control and the security control of a stadium.
That's right. I mean, as Dorothy said, hats off to the French. I mean, this was something that even without the poor weather and even without the rail sabotage would have been almost impossible. I mean, it was the first ever opening ceremony that was held outside a national stadium, and it wasn't even along dry land, it was along the River Seine. Really quite extraordinary, and some of the descriptions of it in the papers tomorrow are quite vivid. Apparently, the offbeat pageant, according to the Express, was crammed full of irreverence, romanticism, patriotism and avant-garde nods. With Moulin Rouge-inspired performances, an armada of athletes. I mean, there was, almost 10,000 or more than 10,000 athletes from 200 countries, 350,000 spectators and 1 billion viewers at home. So really quite the spectacle. And the fact they pulled it off, which, as I say, would have been almost impossible even without all the obstacles, in the rain, with the rail systems down, delaying 1 million travellers, including Sir Keir Starmer, from getting there. He had to fly rather than take the Eurostar I think was quite remarkable and makes you think, you know, well done the French.
Well, yes, such a shame about the rain. But let's talk about this hunt now for the Olympic saboteurs. You know, where do you start? From the hard left anarchists, you know, from the global bad players. You know, there's a long list, isn't there, really?
Yes, I mean, I think a lot of the papers are pointing to Russia, but then others are looking at the far left, all rather than terrorism. It will be some time before we know, but I think what has been important, and most people will see this, is that they did it. And we can, as societies now, allow ourselves to be brought down by people who are trying to destroy major events.
Taking a look at the Daily Telegraph now as well, and we see our flag bearers, Helen Glover, Tom Daley, veterans of the Olympics, it has to be said now, doing their own Titanic, is how it was described, wasn't it? With the bow of the ship. And I think it was put out, wasn't it, by Team GP with the words that were used in the Titanic as well. Anyway, a bit of flair from them. But the sentence here is the world gets an eyeful of French flair, Jake.
That's right, and again, I mean, it was, if anything, it was full of flair. I mean, as I said, it was hugely colourful. As you said, you know, 3.25 mile flotilla of 90 boats and so forth. And as Dorothy said, the sabotage that was taking place across the rail network didn't manage to derail, as it were, these events, but is very, very worrying. And it's interesting that the suspicion is falling upon the Russians. There's been one arrest, a 40-year-old called Kirill Grizanov, who's been charged with working with a foreign power to try to incite hostilities in France. So suspicion squarely on the Russians, but also the far left.
Which is this headline here, clearly, isn't
Which
it?
is the headline on the front of the Telegraph. And indeed the Iranians, who we've been hearing over the past couple of days, have been plotting terror attacks. It's interesting that we see this microcosm of geopolitics, the alliance between the far left, the Russians and the Iranians. The only major player that's absent from that is the Chinese. But other than that, you have this microcosm of hostility on the global stage, excuse me, represented in the sabotage on the TGV systems and the threat of further disruption and indeed terror attacks in Paris to come.
Yes, indeed, and Islamist terrorism, you know, lower down the list, because the suggestion is this is simply not their modus operandi, but, you know, the investigation will be long and detailed because of the number of sites that were affected, I suppose, weren't there? And the difficulty is that you can have a ring of steel, but how far do you extend it? You know, 8 cities are hosting events for the Paris Games. And the headline, or the first paragraph, rather, in the Daily Telegraph, France warned that the Olympic Games are threatened with further chaos. So that is, you know, that's the fear now, isn't it?
I suppose they are warning us to get us ready in case it happened. But I think we will be seeing pictures soon of the rail workers who foiled one of the attacks. And I think everybody in France will now be on the lookout.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have got pictures of, you know, them working on the lines. Clearly, 1 in 4 Eurostar services from London to Paris was disrupted. Keir Starmer, as you mentioned, having to fly. Daily Mail, some of the headlines you were talking about, which are not so positive.
Yeah,
France suffered a humiliating
I think the Daily
fireball
Mail
attack.
has let itself down here. La farce. I mean, compare this with the generosity in the other papers. The Daily Telegraph, a right-wing paper, an eye full of French flair. It wasn't la farce, it was spectacular, it was wonderful, and they overcame the difficulties that saboteurs put in their way. And I'm a bit surprised that the Mail should allow themselves to be co-opted by the people trying to put it all down.
Well, you know,
And it's not a humiliating, they call it a humiliating firebomb attack. It's not. You're not humiliated if you are the victim of a terrorist or attack or sabotage.
I mean, the problem is that with the French, there's a strong temptation towards Schadenfreude, to use a German word, isn't it? Particularly if you're from a Daily Mail's persuasion. I think people sort of in Britain enjoy seeing the French suffer and fail, but at the same time, we enjoy seeing them succeed. And I would, like you, veer more on the positive with this. But I think that there is a very serious side to this, which is the sabotage. There are different orders of threat. There's the anarchism, the sabotage, the disruption. But then, of course, there's a more serious threat of actual bloodshed, which we may, God forbid, be in danger of as the games progress. And that's really the thing that we do not want to see. Any kind of terror attack would be absolutely disastrous for France.
Yes, and the suggestion, if it's possible to estimate, is that 800,000 passengers were impacted by this. So large-scale impact, but not bloodshed, which is the point you're making, isn't it? Inside pages of The Times, Paris does the Games proud, even as it rains on Macron's parade. Picture there, you probably can't see it, but of Keir Starmer amid those who are wearing presumably the free rein max.
He's being very British, isn't he? Maybe he's taken a leaf out of Rishi Sunak's book. Do you remember when he stood outside Downing Street? Is this going to be a new political thing in Britain that they compete with standing in the rain instead of putting a hat on, which would be more common sense?
But it's funny, isn't it? Because you see that picture of Keir Starmer there, surrounded by those people in ponchos.
Yeah, it's so small. I don't know if we can zoom in on that.
You might not be able to see it, but he looks sort of almost Churchillian in his defiance of the rain, whereas contrasted with Rishi Sunak when he announced the election, looking beleaguered and drowned like a drowned animal. I think that he's already beginning to look. He's got a bit more energy behind him at the moment. Anyway.
Yes, we'll have to rephrase the mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun soon, won't we? Actually. Anyway, again here, finger of blame pointed at Russia, Iran, the left, and nutters is how the Times headline says. I mean, as I said, the investigation, you start at any point, don't you, really?
It will continue. I mean, it's very interesting to see here the huge operation of the French. 45,000 police officers, 18,000 soldiers on standby. I mean, this is a huge operation to protect the games and the people at it.
I mean, is it fair to say, as some security experts have, that never has a Games taken place amidst such difficult geopolitics? I mean, we've seen Moscow, LA, some of these games really affected, haven't they, by, whole teams not being allowed to come or not turning up. But we have war in the Middle East, we have war in Ukraine. The circumstances are indeed difficult. That's right. I mean, we're closer to a third world war than we've been since the second one, as Trump said last night in his meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister. And I think that France really has been at the centre of that in some ways, because there's a big Muslim population. The highest Muslim population in Europe is in France. We've seen huge demonstrations concerning Gaza taking place in Paris and in France in general. A lot of anti-Semitic attacks as well. The war, and of course the Israeli team coming to Paris as part of the Olympics, particularly under threat, preparing themselves for not just mobs and booing tonight as the Israeli athletes were carried through. It reminded me of Eden Golan, the Israeli Eurovision star, who performed with huge bravery in that competition. She had to rehearse with her own team booing at her, so that she could learn to be able to be able to withstand and not respond to that booing from the crowd when it came. So these people are showing great courage to go out and do sports for their country in the face of such hostility, and also actual terror threat from the Iranians as well, which has been shared by the Israeli intelligence. So, and France is at the heart of all this. I mean, France as well, has had a very destabilising time politically. Big election that was almost an upset with the far right seizing power, and in the end it was averted by an alliance of the hard left and the moderates. Macron declining in popularity. A lot of unrest, civil unrest. We've seen riots in France quite a lot. I mean, the French quite like rioting, but we've seen a lot of that. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Let's not be anti-French tonight. But of course, France has been very, very supportive of Ukraine, which is why people are looking towards it being a Russian attack. And when you say we've never had an Olympics like this, don't forget the Berlin Olympics under the Nazis. The Olympics has suffered all sorts of terrible things in its history. Munich, another one. Yes. I mean, let's be, we reflect back. It is a global focal point, which brings, which is an opportunity for people who want to sow hatred. Yeah, it's certainly the picture story of the newspapers, is it not? The Games officially opened by President Macron, the cauldron now lit, the days of events underway. And coming back after the break, we will talk more about the other stories in the newspaper.
There's something happening in this silence, some kind of sweet and wordless song.
I think there was always this feeling of things being unfinished because we broke up at the peak of our success. It wasn't like we fizzled out. So it was kind of like a very, always for all of us, a feeling that one day we should do this, but that one day looked increasingly unlikely to happen as time went on. And then suddenly, hold on, the stars aligned and everything happened and made it the right time to do it, and here we are. So we weren't expecting to have that kind of success. I liken it to being like in a Morris Minor, going for a drive in a little Morris Minor on a Sunday afternoon and accidentally finding yourself on a Formula One racetrack. And whoa, this is a bit much, and it was overwhelming, and we just didn't know how to deal with it, and so everything imploded and left us kind of a bit bedazzled for a long time, really.
It's got to be perfect. It's got to be.
So, 34 years on, how different does it feel? How much have you learnt from your times working separately? You've carried on with your music, haven't you?
Yeah.
But, have you learnt from that? How does it feel different now?
Well, like anyone, you grow up, basically, hopefully, theoretically anyway, and so coming back together has been a lot calmer, and we don't have expectations for it to go back to the crazy stuff, and we wouldn't want it to, and so we're doing it with a different attitude. Like, wouldn't this be a nice sort of healing event for us personally? And a kind of thank you to all the people who transformed our lives with that, by buying that song and album, First of a Million Kisses. And so it's a sort of thank you and hey, wasn't this cool kind of tour? And the album Beautiful Happening, the title of it as well, sort of expresses that this is a beautiful event for us and hopefully for the people who join us in shows. The people who loved the First of a Million Kisses album often say that it was such an important part of their growing up, and it's great to sort of see how was it for you? How was it for you? And so I think it'll be a very powerful and emotional experience, the shows.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me once again, Jake Wallace-Simons and Dorothy Byrne. Welcome back to both of you. Let's head to The Guardian now, shall we? Amidst whatever we're going to hear from Rachel Reeves on Monday, the news that millions of public sector workers should get a big pay rise. They have been falling behind private sector workers, Jake, comparatively in terms of what they've been getting. That's right. This is a recommendation from an independent body, which it looks like Rachel Reeves is going to take on board at a cost of up to £10 billion per year to give these pay rises to teachers and doctors and others, 5.5% pay rise, despite a black hole in the finances, which is about to announce of £20 billion, which he's blaming on the Tories. One would have thought that a further £10 billion cost per year wouldn't help to mend that black hole, but that's what she's seeking to do. The thing that worries me about it is the rationale behind it, which is that the cost of strikes are so great
that giving a pay rise would avert those costs. She's saying that the costs every day of teachers' strikes cost £300 million. And that sounds to me a little like sugaring a pill of appeasement to the strikers. If they know that the financial cost is so great of them taking strike action and that the government is going to cave to those demands, it's only going to embolden them to make further demands down the line. So I do worry about that slightly.
Do you not trust it? Do you think possibly, it's Labour policy to reward public sector workers, and that's actually what we're seeing here, and the strikes is an excuse in order to do it, or not?
I think it was clear before the election they were going to do this. They always planned to do this. This is not a sudden new decision. There is a logic to saying that the declining wages are causing severe staff shortages and there's very low morale, and that if you are to really turn round our education services and our health services, which everybody believes we need to do, you probably do. It's nothing to do even with being a Labour government. You probably need to do something to give them a boost, especially as Labour is also going on and on about how catastrophic the NHS is, which must be very demoralising for people. I mean, I think to say industrial action is costing the health service billions is a relevant point. But this government was never going to start its period in office with a fight with public service workers, was it? That was just never going to happen. That's why they've conveniently found this so-called mystery £20 billion loss, so they can blame it on the Tories.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it
This
does.
is the Express while we're talking, isn't it? So let's have a look at that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, are you sceptical? Because there are some Tories who are out and right now suggesting that Rachel Reeves is lying about the sudden discovery of 20 billion. But sorry, I interrupted you. Jane.
Yeah, I mean, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? I feel that. I mean, the Express is making the point that this is just a way of justifying tax hikes. And, I'm not sure, I think saying that it's a con is perhaps going a little far, but it's difficult to see how Labour's going to fund this without raising taxes. Don't forget, before the general election, and Keir Starmer very clearly said, or rather not very clearly said, that he wasn't going to raise taxes on working people without defining what working people
Well, I think he did, and they got
meant.
criticised for it, didn't he, actually?
And so, but it does. But money is going to have to come from somewhere, and Labour is setting out its stall very much at the moment to the markets as being a party of fiscal responsibility, of prudence. That battle with the backbenchers that we saw over the child benefit cap sent a message to the markets that we are going to be a responsible hand on the tiller to keep interest rates down and so forth. And that's all good. But I do worry about these strikes because they're giving an average rise of 5.5%. But last time I looked, the junior doctors were looking for what, 30%? A 30% pay rise?
But they've already had some.
They've had some. This is still some way off what they.
But even they knew that was
and so the door is
realistic.
open. The door is open for further strikes.
Just very quickly, the FT, Rachel Reeves, to scrap uncosted projects. What are we talking about here?
Well, again, probably predictable. Road projects. Some of them, I think, they point to the £1.7 billion tunnel under Stonehenge. I think a lot of people won't be missing that, will they? But it will mean that road projects, according to this, major road projects, major hospital those 40 promised hospitals will not be coming along, according to this article, which will cause an issue because some of those hospitals are actually desperately needed.
OK, and just very quickly, let's just have a look at the Obamas endorsing, there we go, Kamala Harris, brings her closer to the Democratic presidential nomination. Plenty of time to talk about that in our next part of our programme. For now, Jake and Dorothy, thank you.